The RSS today is one of the most influential organizations in India. But as it completes its 100-year journey, how much do we really know about the life and mind of the man who founded it? I'm Barkha Dutt, you're with the Mojo Story. On the program today, we'll be speaking to the author of a fascinating new biography on the man who founded the RSS. Hedgewar is a name that we often hear in political debate. But what do we really know about him? Not just about his early years, but about how he actually thought. A new book, a new biography argues that the RSS has been caricatured by both its critics and its blind supporters, and offers a complex, if provocative, portrait of KB Hedgewar, the man behind the birth of the RSS. I want to welcome to the program now the author of this new biography, Sachin Nandha, is with us. Sachin, welcome to the program, and congratulations on your book. It's a fascinating portrait. I think it's provocative in many parts. It offers new nuggets, at least to those who haven't dived deep into the subject. So congratulations. What made you write this book? I think, as you say in the introduction to the book, the RSS has been a caricature, both for its critics, but also for those who have adored it, supported it blindly, who don't want any complex argument or debate around it. And one of the most fascinating lines in your book, if I may just bring it up, was that Hedgewar, the militant Hindu, was penetratingly critical of Hindu society. And here you liken him to Karl Marx, and you say that actually Marx understood capitalism with an expertise that many capitalists have not displayed. So talk a little bit about why this book and what was the most surprising discovery for you about the man who founded the RSS.
Thank you, Barkha. It's a pleasure to join you, and thank you for having me on. Look, I mean, I think I should explain, right, that this book has taken 7 years to research and write. So it certainly wasn't a weekend project. I come from a particular angle. So I'm a trained philosopher, and I have a background in comparative religion, particularly Christianity and Islam. And so I came from that perspective. And what I was trying to do was, as you rightly said, I was trying to understand the mind of Hedgewar. And what was the early rise of the RSS like, and what was the kind of circumstances within which it grew. The reality is that I think India has reached a stage where someone like me, who is raised from outside of India, third generation out, and we try and look back at India. Now, whether I came to India as an investor and as a backpacker trying to find my family roots. But wherever you go, whether you're a policymaker, tourist, whether you're a policy investor, I think you cannot understand modern India without grappling with and bumping into RSS in one shape or another. I think the RSS has interwoven itself with the fabric of Indian society. And that's something that becomes very apparent when you scratch the surface. So then the question was, well, what is this RSS? And everybody has an opinion in India about the RSS. But I found that when you scratch those opinions, you got very little substance. And so then I thought, well, okay, where do I begin? So I started reading Christoph Jeffrelow's Hindu Nationalism, and that kind of became the topographical map for me to originally explore that. And I read a lot of other academia. But what I realized was that the academics actually had very little source material, very little primary material to understand the early RSS or Hedgewar. And there's very little written about him anyway. When I then read RSS literature, I found that to be problematic because often it was window dressing. There were often hagiographies, and they were written for a particular audience for a particular time, which certainly wasn't palatable to someone like me. So there was a real dearth of knowledge there, understanding Hedgewar and the early RSS, and hence this book. Hence, over 7 years, finding source materials, original letters, original notes, both in Nagpur, Delhi. The British Library, of course, is a fantastic treasure trove. So all of these things help me build this narrative.
Now, Sachin, it's interesting that your reference point for research started with Christoph Jafferlo, who is, of course, while a longtime student of the Sangh Parivar, a very well-established critic of what he argues are the politics of the RSS. You question some of the perceptions of the RSS. And before we get to those, I think one of the fascinating chapters of the book is Hedgewar's relationship with the Indian National Congress. Like so many men and women of his time, he actually starts off as an activist with the Indian National Congress. And then, as you say, he was deeply saddened by the decisions of the Congress. And one of the points that you make in your book is that the disagreement was not over problems. The disagreement was over solutions. And the divergence was not just with Nehru, it was eventually and fundamentally with Gandhi. So speak a little bit about Hedgewar's relationship with the Congress in the early years.
Yes,
and
one thing is clear, is that the book basically compartmentalizes Hedgewar's life into three buckets. The first phase of his life is this angry revolutionary, right? He's young, he's tough, he's 6'2", he's built like a wrestler, and he's a bit angry. He sees the destitution of his people. The Indian society is decrepit in that sense, is deindustrialized, is illiterate. He was particularly affected by the condition of women and you know the general backwardness of it all. Second phase of his life is that he transitions out of an angry revolutionary into a congressman, into a political player, because he begins to realize and says, actually, maybe violence is not the way to defeat the British, and running underground secret societies may not be the ultimate solution, and we have to have a political solution. So he effectively becomes a political nationalist, and he joins the Congress, and he becomes an activist, as you say. But the third phase of his life is where he transitions out of being a political nationalist and into a cultural nationalist. And I think this bit is really the most interesting bit as to how his mind develops and evolves. So he, you know, you're absolutely correct in what you said, that if you were to get Nehru, Gandhi, Hedgewar, Bose, Savarkar into a room, and wouldn't that be a story? But imagine if you got them all into a room and you got them to explore Indian society, Indian civilization, they would pretty much agree on the whole of the past that Indian society peaked around the 4th, 6th century AD. It then began to plateau around 1000 AD, and then it began to accelerate its decline. And really, from the 1750s onwards, it had hit a real low in every single shape and form. They would have even agreed somewhat on the causes of that decline. They would have all agreed that caste was a problem. Caste essentially fossilized the society. It reduced social mobility to zero or near zero. And in a society where there's no social mobility, you do not get innovation. And when you don't get innovation, that's the telltale signs of a falling society. So they would have agreed on all of that. Where they become divergent, and the divergence is, by the way, a matter of degrees. It's not big, but when you expand that divergence by a few degrees over 100 years, it becomes significant, right? So what were some of those divergent points? So Bose, Savarkar, Gandhi, all these people, Nehru, they were all political nationalists. What do I mean by that? And I think we have to have linguistic hygiene when we begin to have this discourse, which I found that modern Indian contemporary discussions and discourse on this stuff doesn't have the linguistic hygiene, and therefore we get confused around terminology. So by political nationalism, what it means is when people believe that the state, the Rajya, is real, and by capturing the state, you can then control and engineer the society, the Rashtra. That's political nationalism. All of these people, all of these contemporaries of Hedgewar were political nationalists. Hedgewar transitioned out of political nationalism into cultural nationalism, which basically says that the state is imaginary. The Rajya is imaginary, it's secondary. What really exists is the Rashtra. And therefore, what he decided and what he saw was that the problem with India was not the British. It wasn't the Islamic invasions. They were all symptoms of the problem. The problem he came to was the Hindu society. the Hindu society was problematic because of caste, class, and creed, right? And so social capital, what Robert Putnam calls social capital, had come to a zero. And so Indian society was fragmented, and therefore poor and destitute and oppressed and suffered tyranny. So he set out a cultural nationalist project, which was how do you build mechanisms, nodes, where people can come together who could, by activity, transcend their caste, class, and creed. And he called that the shaka. The shakas are these nodes in society which build social capital, right? Which effectively, and what is social capital? Social capital is where basically human beings, you and I, we come to do activities together that we otherwise would not do. And by being together in the same space, doing the same kind of activities, we begin to build trust. We begin to build relationships and friendships. That is the bedrock of civic life, civic society. So Hedgewar felt that it's that civic life that builds the Rajya, the state. The others felt the opposite. And that divergence means that Hedgewar in 1925, really focuses on cultural nationalism and the RSS, and he really withdraws gradually away from the Congress.
Yeah. So talking about those divergences, one of the most polarizing divergences, as you write in the book, was over the flag, right? And to this date, the RSS is often taunted by its political opponents over the flag. And you say something very, very interesting in your book about the Bhagwat Dutt, the argument. The Nehru wanted, everybody to embrace the Tiranga. This is pre-independence, and Hedgewar believed in the saffron flag. And you say that till Narendra Modi actually becomes Prime Minister, comes into government, and you use an interesting phrase. You say, till their man, their creation, Narendra Modi is actually at the helm of government. The RSS used to salute the Bhagwat Dutt. Now, I want you to talk about this because the Congress and the RSS critics have always used this to say that, look, Hedgewar did not even believe in our tricolor. And this has changed, as you write, with Modi, who I just had to pick out this phrase, their man, their creation, that leapt out at me, came into government. The RSS used to hoist the saffron flag. And this has been a very, very big controversy even till today.
Okay. Well, I mean, you picked up a strand which we can then really unravel and unpick, if you like. I must confess my ignorance of modern Indian political discourse. I live 5,000 miles away, and I really don't understand the nuances of modern day conversation. So I'll leave that to one side. However, let's talk about what the book says and the history. I can certainly talk about that. So the Congress in the 30s produced a commission. You see, by the mid-30s, Barkha, what a lot of our modern discourse doesn't appreciate is that most elite Indians in the Congress, whichever spectrum you were in, knew that the British were in retreat. The British state was retreating. It was no longer capable or able to build and own an empire. So the question that actually the elites were asking was that it's not a matter of if the British will leave, but when the British will leave. And this is back in the mid-30s. So essentially what the INC did was that when they discovered that actually the British were on the retreat and it was a matter of time when India would be independent, what kind of flag should India have, independent India have? Perfectly sensible thing to do, to create a committee and go and ask the public. So they went and did focus groups, they went and did interviews, they polled, and it was led by 6 people in this committee. One of them was Nehru. The other was a Muslim gentleman called Afzal Khan. They were all part of the committee. At the end of 2 years, this committee submits a report to the Congress and basically says that what the report has found, reluctantly, is that the people want a flag that represents their culture or civilization, what you want to call it, and it has to be kesari with a chakra somewhere in the corner, right? A Ashoka's chakra in the corner. that report was signed off by Nehru. It was signed off by Afzal Khan and all the other 6 people of the committee. It went to Gandhi, and Gandhi vetoed it. He just sidelined the committee and said, "I will not allow this. It has to be a Triranga," I think is how they say it, right? So the tricolors. And that report caused internal ruckus across the Congress, and of course it upset the Hindu Mahasabha corner of the Congress. It of course also upset a whole bunch of other people, but Gandhi's veto was final. And so when Nehru asks everybody, and when he claims that now the Congress is going to ask for Purna Swaraj, complete independence, because the British backtracked on their dominion status, he basically puts up the tricolors. Now for Hedgewar, we've got evidence that he also wants to celebrate this notion that the Congress has shifted its rhetoric from asking for dominion status to asking for full independence, by actually doing what Nehru suggested, which is everybody, on this particular day, salute the new Indian flag. Except for Hedgewar, the Indian flag was the Kesari, which is what he had always felt was what the Indian flag should be. And so he sends out a circular to all the shakas of that time and says, we shall all support the Congress, we should all pay homage to the flag, but it will be the Bhagwa Dutt. It'll be the Kesari flag. Because he felt that Gandhi's veto does not represent the people. And that then became tradition for decades and decades and decades. Now, here we have to understand that when India did become independent, now what you have is a culturally nationalist organization, the RSS, paying homage to a culturally important symbol, the Bhagwa Dutt, the Kesari flag, which the RSS and history shows that the commission had wanted to make as the Indian flag. But Gandhi vetoed it. And ever since then, the tricolors have always been hosted as India's flag. And so this created this rupture within the society, and where all the controversy starts from. And only very recently, as I say, that the RSS now accepts the tricolors as well as the Bhagwa Dutt, because essentially Hedgewar's prophecy, Hedgewar's foresight was, if you can make the Rashtra strong, if you can build the social capital required at the Rashtra level, the Rajya will automatically come into line. And so that's why I make that quip that you picked up on, that Narendra Modi becoming part of the Rajya now proves Hedgewar right.
Well, that may be a longer debate for a different conversation. I want to move on with some other interesting nuggets from your book. Talk about the differences with Mahatma Gandhi. Very provocatively for many, in your introduction, you write, it is Hedgewar who has become, in many ways, the father of the nation. Now, that is obviously a very personal view, but the father of the nation for generations of Indians has been Gandhi. And you speak to, in your book, it almost comes across as if Hedgewar's essential difference was more with Gandhi than with Nehru. And this is so interesting because Nehru, today when we talk about pluralistic India, we talk about secularism, a lot of people believe that Nehru had it wrong. He did not understand that in India, it's very difficult to separate culture from religion. Gandhi had it right. Gandhi was not westernized. Gandhi was rooted, but Gandhi believed in the celebration of each other's religions. Now, you say that Hedgewar and Gandhi fundamentally, in a sense, differed. What did your research find out on their essential points of difference?
It's a great question. So, firstly, Gandhi and Hedgewar only met once. They only met once. This is into the early 30s, and they met for 1 hour. So they had a conversation for 1 hour, and I document that in the book at some length. But I think the main difference is essentially this. Gandhi was a political nationalist in the sense that he felt like everybody else at that time, you have to capture the state, you have to build the state, and then from the state, we will build a society, a magnanimous country, right? Whatever that magnanimity looked like, that's up to them. Hedgewar felt, no, you have to start from the society, the grassroots. And his critique was of the Hindu society. And so you have to fix the mainstream first, and then the Rajya will take care of itself. Now that's one difference. Second thing is, Gandhi's style of governance was incredibly dictatorial. That is not controversial. Anybody who reads and understands the way in which Gandhi managed the Congress, especially when he came to the fore after Subhash Chandra Bose had left, Aurobindo Ghosh had gone, and he became the mainstay. Tilak had died. Gandhi becomes the mainstay. It is very, very top-down dictatorial. And Nehru is his number two, effectively. And there were many times when Nehru and Gandhi disagreed. Gandhi's view won out. There were very, very many times that Gandhi made decisions that Hedgewar absolutely was distraught by. For example, the Mapila riots, euphemism riots, it was a bit of a massacre when you read the reports. Gandhi systemically, and we've got it in writing, where Gandhi systemically says, oh yes, what's happened is basically a tragedy, it's really bad, but actually the fault all lies with the Hindus. And if they hadn't treated the Mapila so badly, none of this would have happened. That enrages a whole swathe of the people, but Hedgewar was one of those that was distraught, because what Hedgewar saw was the rupture that was happening within the Indian social fabric, not just between Hindus and Muslims, but actually between the kind of society that Indians wanted to develop post-independence. So Hedgewar's biggest concern was, rather than unifying the society through a common culture, a common civilization, and here Hedgewar writes, by the way, that he saw the RSS not built on class, caste, or creed. Creed meaning religion. For Hedgewar, the line, as if you want to call it, the red line, was Deshbhakti. Deshbhakti is not patriotism, right? We got to, again, really, really be nuanced about these words and these dialogues. For Hedgewar, Gandhi was a patriot, wanted to capture the state, and he wanted to dictate the kind of India to the Indian people. A very top-down attitude, a top-down way of driving the society forward. For right or wrong, better or worse, that's for others to comment. Hedgewar's view was that it's a grassroots thing. It's a bottom-top issue. And so the bottom has to drive the top, not the other way around. And so this is where the RSS and the Congress do this. They diverge. And that divergence just keeps on going as the decades go by. So these fundamental differences, but having said that, let me say one thing. Hedgewar, Gandhi, etc., both had respect for each other. They disagreed fundamentally, but Gandhi visited the RSS twice. He spoke at RSS camps twice. Hedgewar went to visit Gandhi, and he supported Gandhi in the Satyagraha. Supported, even though philosophically, ideologically, they were different and they wouldn't agree with each other, but there was respect. And I think there's something to be said about that, Barkha, in modern India, where I find that everything is so polarized that even dialogue and discussion, there's no safe space to have a mature, sensible conversation. And I think there's something to be said about these kinds of individuals who did.
Absolutely. I mean, the capacity to engage with a different point of view is something we're losing all around the world, not only in India, and that's so important.
Quite right.
But if Mahatma Gandhi was at one end of the spectrum, Subhash Chandra Bose had a very different idea of how to liberate India from the British. But Hedgewar and Bose also had fundamental differences. What were they?
Yes, quite right. So again, they all would have agreed on the past and the causes of India's downfall and India's oppression. But the solution, what kind of India do we want to build post-independence, was different. Bose, and let me say this not from a moral perspective, let me say this from a literal political philosophical perspective, Bose was a fascist. By fascist, I mean he did not believe in democracy. He said so in 1944. And he said that India needs a strong man, one-party dictatorship for 20 odd years in order to fix India. Again, remember political nationalism. We capture the state and then we tell you, Rashtra, how to be good. He was a fascist and he wasn't a Democrat. And he believed that through war, through violence, we can uproot the British and throw them out. And for Bose, for him, the means justified, the ends justified the means, always. For Hedgewar, on all three counts, it was totally abhorrent. Hedgewar was not a fascist. He did not believe in strongman dictatorships running the country. He believed in the grassroots and cultural nationalism. Number two, he didn't believe in violence. Violence he had already abandoned back in 1921, where he realized that actually this is not the way in which we need to uproot the British and rebuild India. And of course, he was a grassroots to top guy, Rashtra to Rajya, not Rajya to Rashtra. So all these things meant that while Hedgewar respected Bose, no doubt, and while Bose came to see Hedgewar, however, they never met, because Hedgewar had already fallen ill by then, there was mutual respect for one another, yet their vision of India was different.
Yeah, let me end with something the RSS gets criticized for the most, which is the RSS anti-Muslim? Now, the RSS of today actually has a whole wing, the purpose of which is to engage with Muslims. We have had recently prominent Muslim public figures going to meet with the RSS chief to try and reach a more sort of reconciliatory relationship on some of the contentious issues. You write in your book that the RSS, according to you, is not anti-Muslim. It is anti-Islam, and to be specific, it is anti a particular kind or a particular type of Islam, right? Now, I want you to expound on this, because I think in contemporary India, where Modi is in a third term, almost everything else may be up for debate, but India's diversity, India's essential sort of characteristic as a diverse nation of many religions, regions, identities, is something to celebrate. And the RSS keeps getting criticized for being anti-Muslim. How do you react to that?
Yeah, I mean, again, I won't comment on modern times. I'm just not an expert on anything that's happening in current discourse. However, let me do it. I can, I think, fairly confidently explain and talk about Hedgewarian thought when it comes to the other, inverted commas, right? Hedgewar was, as I mentioned, was his line in the sand was Deshbhakti. It was not caste. In fact, Hedgewar is known to have said and written, caste must be removed lock, stock, and barrel. His words, not mine. So there's absolute clarity on that. Class. Hedgewar had an abhorrence for class. He if you look at the RSS, it's an incredibly egalitarian movement in Hedgewarian times, right? Those first early 15, 16 years. Very, very, and even Gandhi comments on this, right? That the egalitarian you see within the RSS structures is, it's unique at that time. The third thing is creed, religion. Now here it gets very messy. Let me say that Hedgewar, as far as I can see, as far as I found, did not have much to say about Muslims. Just didn't have much to say. In fact, one of his biggest influences while he was at university was a Maulana called Liaquat Hussain, right? And Liaquat Hussain, I believe, imbibed a deep understanding of Islam and the ruptures within Islam post-World War I that were happening. And let me tell you something, that in the book, I draw this out at some length. If in World War I, the Caliphate had not been dissolved by the European powers, which caused a crisis of faith within Islam, right? We have to understand something that for 1400 years, Islam had a caliph, right? Somebody who was the protector of the righteous, protector of the believers, Darussalam, right? And for the first time, that seat had been evaporated. It was just gone. It caused a crisis of faith across Islam. Now, what happened was there were three broad buckets, and this is relevant for the RSS. Number one, there were those Muslims like Ataturk who said Islam was the problem. Islam is the problem, let's get rid of it. So they took on a modern Western secularist viewpoint and they got rid of Islam. And that was Ataturk. Second types were actually Islam is not the problem. Islam can enrich human life, but it is backdated. It is backwards. So we need to modernize and liberalize Islam, right? These were the philosophers and the kind of progressives within Islam. They manifest in Syria, in Iran, etc., etc. Then you had the other bucket, which was where basically Muslims felt that we are not pious enough. And so God is punishing the Islamic world by this humiliation after the First World War and the Ottoman Empire is dissolved. So we're not Muslim enough. And so what happens is you get this entire conservative, theocratic bubbling to the surface of clerics who generally would sideline. But after World War I, they become prominent, and they become prominent in the subcontinent, where they say that we have to go back to the Rashidun, the rightly guided ones, 7th century. We have to become more Muslim, pious Muslims. And those clerics, for whatever reason, become prominent within the subcontinent. Deobandi Islam, Berwari Islam, these forms of Islam come along and they sideline people like Maulana Liaquat Hussain and these guys who are modernists, who are trying to liberalize Islam. And so these radical orthodox voices of Islam become the dominant force within India. And what they say is that any kind of Deshbhakti is idolatrous. It's idolatrous. So now you have two lines in the sand. Both will not budge on it. And here we are today, right? And that's the reality that India has to grapple with, is the reality that everybody has to reflect on, that here you have, it's so from the RSS perspective, the Hedgewarian perspective, Muslims can join the RSS, Christians can join the RSS, Buddhists can join the RSS, Sikhs can join the RSS, atheists can join the RSS. Hedgewar could not care less how you pray, what you pray to, when you pray. But he did care about Deshbhakti, and that's the line. And so how I don't know, it's not my job to know, but this is certainly, I hope the book allows meaningful dialogue and discussion about these.
Well, it's been a fascinating conversation, Sachin. I urge more people to read the book. It doesn't matter whether you identify as a supporter of the RSS, a critic of the RSS. I think there is no doubt that this is a valuable addition to the information and the material that we have available to understand the man who founded one of the most influential organizations of contemporary Indian times. Thank you so much, Sachin Nandha. It's been a pleasure. Sachin Nandha's book, Hedgewar, a biography of the man who founded the RSS, is now out and available for you to pick up your copy. So do pick it up. I'm sure you'll all have your own thoughts, and we look forward to engaging with all of you, irrespective of points of view, on this subject. Thanks, Sachin. Take care and see you soon.
Barkha, thank you so much for having me. Bye for now.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.